Hi everyone, welcome to the fourth installment of the Trauma Informed Schools presentation and professional development module. In this particular module, we're going to be talking about how schools in general can provide school-wide strategies that are recommended in a trauma-informed practice. Again, my name is Dr. Regina Rahimi. I am a faculty member in the College of Education at Georgia Southern University, part of a trauma-informed research collaborative that is formed at Georgia Southern University. My colleagues in this collaborative are Dr. Dolores Liston in Curriculum Studies, Dr. Tamara Hunt in the Department of Kinesiology, and Dr. April Garrity in Communication Sciences and Disorders. And we formed this collaborative. This is the first professional development series that we are engaging in, but we really hope to strengthen this collaborative, invite members of the community and school districts to join us, to serve as a site and a source for information for those people that are really interested in getting involved in trauma-informed work. So we'll start this presentation by looking at the 4 assumptions that SAMHSA has related to trauma, and this is how we'll frame our work today. In the 4 assumptions is that people working in a trauma-informed environment should have a realization. So there should be a personal acknowledgement and understanding of the existence of trauma and its impact on people's, families, groups, and communities is real. I know that one of my colleagues in a set of her modules in this professional development series is going to be looking very closely at the impact of trauma on the brain, and so I would urge you to pay careful attention to that. But I think what we have found through research and years of research now is that absolutely trauma does impact people, and it impacts people cognitively, emotionally, physically, but it also connects and impacts and affects their families and their communities as a whole. So that's the first realization and first understanding and assumption that those people working with trauma-informed practice need to understand. The second assumption is that there is a recognition of signs. So there are signs behaviorally, cognitively, physically, and socially that those people that have been traumatized can exhibit. And so being aware of those signs is really important. That if you're a trauma-informed practice, you're engaged in responsiveness. And so this would mean that you're committed to the principles of trauma-informed practice through budgeting, training, policies, leadership, practices, consistency. And then the last visit is that you're willing to revisit practices that could re-traumatize. So making a commitment to safe organizational environments. So we would encourage anybody that's interested in developing a school-wide trauma-informed lens, first take a look at these 4 basic assumptions. So we'll start by saying that trauma-informed schools is not a process, it's not a product. So it is not something that you just end up having. It is a process. It is something that is always on your mind, always developing, and is ongoing. Put a link here and throughout this presentation that will help guide you a little bit further in this work. I'm going to provide some very general overviews, but you can certainly take a look at these links to do a little deeper dive. So what in general, what are some general practices? And if somebody walks into a building and says, this is a trauma-informed school, what would that look like? So first of all, it would have some supports for regulations of emotions and behaviors. So there would be resources available. There would be supports available for those people and students to self-regulate their behaviors, emotions, and attention, whether in the counselor's office, the teachers in each of the classrooms, and the administrative office. Those supports would be clear and available to all students. There would be practices supporting physical and emotional health and well-being of students and faculty and staff. There would be an increased involvement with counseling staff. Counseling staff would take a real elevated role in trauma-sensitive schools and be heavily involved in all aspects of the school day. There'd be a focus on relationship building. So relationship building within the school, both with students, the school community, and families becomes most important, because what we do know is relationships that have been tarnished for many of these students that have been traumatized can be redeveloped and rebuilt with trusting adults. And so making sure that that emphasis is on building relationships. In a trauma-informed school, this would be very prominent. There's self-management and support for teachers and staff. There's self-care practices, meditation, mindfulness, peer support, open communication practices. In one of the earlier modules that I provided, I talked about teacher wellness and the importance. In a trauma-informed school, it is evident that that teacher wellness takes a real active role and is a prominent part of the school day and the school environment. Other general practices that you would find in a trauma-informed school: a safe, supportive environment, a re-envisioned definition of success in academic and non-academic areas. And I caution by saying this: that does not mean that the expectations are lowered or that there is not an emphasis on rigor. What it means is that success for students can be built into self-defined goals as well. Multi-tiered supports are present. Culturally responsive and conscious discipline practices are in place, and wraparound supports for families are evident in the school building. So what would committed leadership look like in a trauma-informed school? There would be a leader and leaders who study and understand the impact of children and communities. They know the implications on the brain. They understand how trauma impacts cognitive development. They have researched that. They have gathered information and data on that. They're knowledgeable about trauma-informed practice in general, and they're also aware of community resources and community events that support trauma-informed practice. Administrators develop, hopefully collaboratively with others in the building, but they develop mission and vision statements, policies, and practice that permeate trauma-informed practice. They support professional development, staff meetings, and committee work that focuses on TIP. They use social media and websites and other forms of communication to share this priority and information with their school community, families, students, faculty, and staff. They budget items specifically that reflect TIP. They support school practices like arts, like sports, like clubs that serve for outlets for students that really need opportunities to explore and have these outlets in their lives. They foster a shared understanding of TIP within the school community. They support parents, and they serve as a source for resources for those parents. They develop a means of measuring and monitoring the success of their trauma-informed approach. So they don't just develop it and leave it. They monitor it. Is it working? What's working? What's not working? But it becomes part of their school practice. There should be a shared understanding among all staff. So as we look at what a trauma-informed staff looks like, here are some very general guiding practices. They reframe, what can I do to fix this child, to what does this child need? So a trauma-informed staff really embraces the idea that we are a community here to address students' needs. They rely on input from trauma specialists and other community organizations. They engage with clinical staff and social workers. So those are not peripheral staff in the building, but they're integral in the work that teachers are doing when they're building their curriculum, when they're talking about pedagogy, when they're talking about classroom management skills. They really use and are informed by what the clinical staff and social workers know about their students. They understand the awareness of triggers for students. They focus on relationship building within the classroom and in other school spaces. So the cafeteria staff, the nursing staff, the custodian staff is aware of trauma-informed practice and the importance of building relationships with students in the building. They know the signs of abuse, neglect, trauma, Those are talked about. Those are made aware of within the building. They seek professional development on these topics and other related topics like poverty and grieving students and homelessness and military and transient students. All of the ACEs, for example, they're aware of these topics and they seek professional development on these topics. They have a commitment to trauma-informed practice, and they have a commitment to taking care of themselves. They understand that their social emotional well-being is important as they work through working with traumatized students. So as we're building this collaborative and we're in our infant stages of this collaborative, what we hope to do is connect those of you in the community who have other ideas, or you yourselves are trauma specialists, connecting us with other organizations and other groups and school communities so that we can build a trauma-informed network that really provides the best resources for our youth in this area. And lastly, this was a quick presentation, a very general overview of trauma-informed schools, but I would be delighted to spend more time talking to you about trauma-informed schools, the components, very specifics about it, or helping you guide you through the process of developing a trauma-informed school. Lastly, this is a reflection survey, as you've seen in the other modules. If you've participated in any others in the series, we're just asking you to provide some information about this particular presentation, what you would like to see more of, any suggestions or questions that you have. I wish you the best in your work, and take care.